Hey guys, I feel like this lady's like torturing my makeup, so I'm sorry. Um, well, right now we are going to be doing the reading of Memoirs of a Geisha. Um, this is by Arthur Golden, and this is what the cover looks like. I think this is set in China, I think. I don't know. Maybe. I'm pretty sure. It's either that or Japan. It's something Asian. But we're only doing 3 chapters each day. And yeah. So I'm going to get started because I've never read this book. And the book is my mom's, so that's what the back looks like. And I have Taylor Swift playing in the background, so that, yeah. Wait. Okay. Okay. Chapter 1. Suppose that you and I were sitting in a quiet room overlooking a garden, chatting and sipping at our cups of green tea while we talked about something that had happened a long while ago. And I said to you, that afternoon when I met so-and-so was the very best afternoon of my life, and also the very worst afternoon. I expect that you might put down your teacup and say, well, now which was it? Was it the best or the worst? Because it can't simply possibly have been both. Ordinarily, I'd have to laugh at myself and agree with you. But the truth is that afternoon when I met Mr. Tanaka, Ikiro was the best and the worst of my life. He seemed so fascinating to me. Even the fish smell on his hands was a kind of perfume. If I had never known him, I'm sure I would not have become a geisha. I wasn't born and raised in Kyoto to be a Kyoto geisha. I wasn't even born in Kyoto. I am a fisherman's daughter from a little town called Yorido on the Sea of Japan. Okay, so it is from Japan. Okay. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing all of this stuff wrong. I'm just sorry. In all of my life, I had never been told more than a handful of people anything at all about Yoroido, or that the house in which I grew up, or about my mother and father, or my older sister, and certainly not about how I became a geisha, or what it was like to be one. Most people would rather carry on with their fantasies that my mother and grandmother were geisha, and that I began my training in dance when I was weaned from the breast, and so on. As a matter of fact, one day, many years ago, I was pouring a cup of sake for a man who happened to mention that he had been in Yorodo for only the previous week. Well, I felt as a bird must feel when it has flown across the ocean and comes upon a creature that knows its nest. I was so shocked I couldn't stop myself from saying, Yorodo? That's where I grew up. This poor man, his face went through the most remarkable series of changes. He tried his best to smile, though it didn't come out well because he couldn't get the look of shock off his face. Yoroido, you can't mean it. I long ago developed a very practical smile, which I call my no smile, because it resembles a no mask whose features are frozen. It is an advantage that men can intercept it however if they want. No, interpret it however they want. You can imagine how often I've relied on it. I decided I'd better use it just then, and of course it worked. He let out a breath and tossed down the cup of sake I had poured for him before giving an enormous laugh. I was sure prompted by the idea more by relief than anything else. The very idea, he said with another big laugh. You growing up in a dump like Yardo. That's like making tea in a bucket. And when he laughed again, he said to me, that's why you're so much fun, Sayura-san. Sometimes you almost make me believe your little jokes are real. I don't know much like thinking myself as a cup of tea made in a bucket, but I suppose in a way it must be true. After all, I did grow up in Eurodo, and no one would suggest it's a glamorous spot. Hardly anyone ever visits it. As for the people who live there, they never have occasion to leave. You're probably wondering how I came to leave it myself. And that's where the story begins. In our little fishing village of Yordo, I lived in what was called a tipsy house. It stood near a cliff where the wind off the ocean was always blowing. As a child, it seemed to me as if the ocean had caught a terrible cold, because it was always wheezing, and there would be spells when it would let out a huge sneeze, which is to say there was a burst of wind with a tremendous spray. I decided our tiny house must have been offended by the ocean sneezing in its face from time to time, and I took to leaning back because it wanted to get out of the way. Probably it would have collapsed if my father hadn't cut a timber from a wrecked fishing boat to prop up the eaves, which made the house look like a tipsy old man leaning on his crutch. Inside this tipsy house I lived something of a lopsided life, because from my earliest years I was very much like my mother, and hardly at all like my father and older sister. My mother said it was because we were made just the same, she and I. And it was true, we both had the same peculiar eyes, a sort you almost never see in Japan. Instead of being dark brown like everyone else's, my mother's eyes were a translucent gray, and mine are just the same. When I was very young, I told my mother I thought someone had poked a hole in her eyes, and all the ink had drained out, which she thought was very funny. The fortune tellers said that her eyes were so pale because of too much water in her personality, so much that the other 4 elements were hardly present at all. And this, they explained, was why her features matched so poorly. People in the village often said she ought to have been extremely attractive, because her parents had been. Well, a peach has a lovely taste, and so does a mushroom, but you can't put the 2 together. This was the terrible trick nature had played on her. She had her mother's pouty mouth and her father's angular jaw, which gave the impression of a delicate picture with too much heavy frame. And her lovely gray eyes were surrounded by thick lashes that must have been striking on her father, because in her case they only made her look startled. My mother always said she had married my father because she had too much water in her personality and he had too much wood in his. People who knew my father understood right away what she was talking about. Water flows from a place too quickly and always finds a crack to spill through. Wood, on the other hand, holds fast to the earth. In my father's case, this was a good thing, for he was a fisherman, and the man with wood in his personality is at ease in the sea. In fact, my father was more at ease on the sea than anywhere else, and never left it far behind him. He smelled like the sea even after he had bathed, even when he wasn't fishing. He sat on the floor in our dark front room mending a fishing net. And if a fishing net had been a sleeping creature, he wouldn't have even awakened it. At the speed he worked, he did everything this slowly. Even when he summoned a look of concentration, you would run outside and drain the bath in the time it took him to rearrange his features. His face was very heavily creased, and into each crease he had tucked some worry or other, so that it wasn't really his own face any longer, but more like a tree that had nests of birds in all the branches. He had to struggle constantly to manage it, and always looked worn out from the effort. When I was 6 or 7, I learned something about my father I'd never known. One day I asked him, "Daddy, why are you so old?" He hoisted up his eyebrows at this, so that they formed little sagging umbrellas over his eyes. And he let out a long breath and shook his head and said, "I don't know." When I turned to my mother, she gave me a look meaning she would answer the question for me another time. The following day, without saying a word, she walked me down the hill towards the village, and turned at a path into a graveyard in the woods. She led me to 3 graves on the corner and 3 white markers posts, much taller than I was. They had stern-looking black characters written top to bottom on them, but I hadn't even attended the school in our little village too long enough to know where one ended and the next began. My mother pointed them and said, "Natsu, wife of Sakamoto Minoru. Sakamoto Minoru, the name of my father, died aged 24 in the 19th year of Meiji." Then she pointed to the next one. "Junikuro, son of Sakamoto Minoru, died aged 6 in the 19th year of Meiji." And to the next one, which was identical except for the name. Masayo, and the age, which was 3. It took me a while to understand that my father had been married before. A long time ago, that this whole family had died. I went to those graves not long afterwards and found, as I stood there, that sadness was a very heavy thing. My body weighed twice as it had only a moment earlier, as if those graves were pulling me down towards them. I'm not going to finish all 3 chapters, so I lied. This is still in the first chapter, but I think I'm going to only do these book reading videos, hopefully only 10 minutes long. I'm sorry if it was kind of boring, but that's how it is when we're reading a book together. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you didn't, that's okay. Please subscribe to my video for a daily book reading video, and for a couple daily videos every day. Today is singing day, so I'm going to be doing 7 songs. So if you're watching this very early in the day, please comment down below which songs you want me to sing. And hopefully I can find a karaoke version. If not, I will substitute. And yeah, I hope I see you guys again sometime. And so I'm going to leave you guys now. So bye!